How are people affording rent right now? My 50-year-old downstairs neighbor got divorced and then got a roommate from work. His roomie is maybe 20. It's probably like having a son around. I think the change has been good for him even if it's a little unorthodox. He used to argue with his wife loudly at all hours nearly every day. Total hell. She finally walked out on him. He lost a bunch of weight, looks good. He did start drinking and smoking, though. All in all, he's calmer. And the rent's paid. Roommates. 1. Moving to a place that they can afford rent. 2. Cutting other expenses. 3. Roommates. 4. Working more. 5. Not having kids. 6. Getting a raise. 7. Substandard housing. A lot of them aren't. There are a lot more homeless people in my local community than there used to be. I'm not lost everything. Reft went from 900 to 4,550. Oh, couldn't manage anymore with all the other bills. A lot of people aren't. I'm 37 and moved out with roommates when I was 23. I had to move back in with my parents last year because that rent just kept going up. Not to mention everything else. I pay $1,000 for a 500 SQFT house with 3 bedrooms on about an acre of land. Me and my wife split the rent, so it's extremely affordable and I'm no more than a 10-minute drive from anything I need to do. It just depends on where you live in the country tbh. Rent is like $2,200 where I live, but a mortgage on a reasonable house 3-bed, 2-bath, maybe a yard is north of $3,300 with 10 down. OP is correct, it's insane right now. I don't rent anymore, but back when I did, I afforded it by living where the rent was cheaper. My first rental out of college was a 2-bedroom townhouse. It was the equivalent of $865 a month in today's dollars, but I lived 21 miles from work in a town with a population of 8,000. I lived there for 5 years before I moved for work to a much more populated area in the northern part of the state where I was paying $2,250 in today's dollars for rent on a small apartment that didn't hold heat well in the winter. Rented there for a year, after which they wanted to jack up my rent by about 20, so I decided to just buy a place in a cheaper area. It's becoming unsustainable for a lot of people with half their income going to rent. My city was one of the cities with the highest rate of increase this past year. I have a long lease, so I'm praying things cool off by the time rent renewal comes up. I really don't want to have to move. Living at home and hating myself for doing it. Also in Central Florida in a college town. Apartments with multiple tenants. Or locals living with parents or grandparents. Whores in subsidized Section 8 housing. Vancouver, BC. Here I live alone in a studio apartment and my rent is about 30% of my income. The people that can't afford it have roommates. Then there's also people that make more than minimum wage and can afford it. The rest live with their parents. Roommates, and family. I don't know anyone who's living on their own fully independently. 2 incomes are pretty much required to afford rent and food, it seems. They are not. There's a huge propaganda campaign against homeless people being insane drug addicts, when most are just normal poor people who couldn't make rent. Have a good job that pays well. Save like hell, get a mortgage, that way it might cost slightly more than rent, but it will stay the same and it will be your property. Renting is not a business of convenience, it's a money-making scheme that keeps us trapped and unable to invest. No idea. I got lucky and bought my house in 2009 before housing started to skyrocket. It's 2,000 square feet in a manicured subdivision. I pay $1,000 a month and that includes taxes and insurance escrowed. Now the house is worth 4x what I paid for it. Can't sell it though cause I couldn't afford a similar house in the area. My spouse and I are renting a townhouse with 2 other people now in order to be able to afford anything. I'm about to be 34. Never thought this was where I'd be in my mid-30s.